Guinness is a beer almost everyone has heard of. It's that famous. This dry Irish stout is one of the most popular beers in the world. Beer writer Martin Cornell even calls it the gateway to the dark side of beer. But how did Guinness become such a big deal? It started small, but this legendary beer didn't just change how people drank beer between Ireland and England, it even changed how beer pours into your glass. Everyone knows about Arthur Guinness and his super old brewery at St. James's Gate. He started it way back in 1759. You can even see that on the bottle. Oh, and don't forget his crazy 9,000-year lease. Talk about commitment. But before the Guinness stout we all know, there was something called porter. And then came porter stout. Cool, right? Back then they just called it stout. Porters first showed up in the early 1700s. We don't know exactly how porter started, but there are a bunch of ideas out there. This is something beer lovers talk about a lot. The main idea is that porters were probably a mix of young ale and old stock ale. People think they were mostly enjoyed by the porters working in London back then, but the porter beer they drank was pretty different from the ones we know today. A long time ago, porters tasted a little smoky because brewers dried the grains over a fire. They could also be kind of sour because of the way the beer was aged. Back then, brewers didn't have the fancy tools we have now to make sure every beer tasted the same. In the 1700s, bartenders would mix beers together to make them taste better. It helped keep things more consistent. And if they had beer that didn't taste so great, they'd sneak a little into someone's drink instead of throwing it away. Did you know this? These dark brown beers were mostly enjoyed by the working class in London, especially porters, which is how the beer got its name. The first time someone called this beer porter was way back in 1726. It became super popular, and in 1776, porter made its way to Ireland. That was a big deal because it helped kick off the journey for Guinness. Back then, Arthur Guinness was already making beer and sending it to England. He was also the boss of the Dublin Brewers Group. But the famous Guinness stout we all know today wasn't around yet. It was still a long way off. Arthur Guinness started out in Ireland, where he grew up in County Kildare. When he was around 30 years old, his godfather, Archbishop Arthur Price, gave him £100 as an inheritance. Arthur used that money to open a brewery in a place called Leixlip, not too far from Dublin. This all happened way back in 1755. For the next 5 years, he worked hard to build his business. In 1759, he decided to head to Dublin to grow it even more. He ended up at St. James Gate, where two rivers, the Liffey and the Rye, come together. There, he found an old, worn-out brewery. Turns out nobody had used it for 9 years. A long time ago, this place was super popular for its beer. But then the guy who owned the brewery, Gina Spina, fell off his horse. People say he hit his head really bad and died right away. After that, St. James Street was just not the same for a really long time. Arthur Guinness had a big dream to bring life back to a rundown neighborhood. On December 31st, 1759, he signed a famous lease for 9,000 years, paying just £45 a year, and started brewing ale on a 4-acre site in Dublin. At the same time, a drink called porter was getting super popular, not just in England, but in Ireland too. Arthur Guinness learned about a new type of beer called porter and decided to give it a try. In 1778, just a few years after porter arrived in Ireland, he started brewing it along with his usual ale. By 1799, he made the big decision to stop producing ale entirely and focus only on brewing porters. He got super good at it, like really good. Arthur took this type of beer called porter, which originally came from England, and made his own version of it. Then he started selling it back to England. He got so good at it that England was actually buying more beer from Ireland than they were sending to Ireland. Arthur Guinness sure knew how to make some good porter beer. But a big part of why porter became so popular is thanks to the Industrial Revolution. That happened a long time ago, between 1760 and 1840, and it changed a lot of things. Back then, people invented tools like the hydrometer, roasting drum, and black patent malt. These tools made brewing beer easier and helped make it taste the same every time. Other cool inventions, like the steam engine and better transportation, made it possible to create and sell beer faster. Plus, factories helped make beer on a much bigger scale. All of this helped porter become a huge hit. Porter was actually the first beer people made and sold on a big scale. As it changed over time, it became super popular. It was a great time to be Guinness. But we're not quite to the part where the famous Guinness Stout was invented yet. Just a few years before Arthur Guinness passed away at 78, he came up with the idea for what would become the famous Guinness Extra Stout. He made something called a West India Porter, which was a darker, stronger beer with more hops than his regular porter. That beer eventually turned into the foreign Extra Stout we all know and love today. But guess what? He didn't actually invent the Guinness we all know today. Crazy, right? Still, he's the guy who kicked things off. Funny thing is, he probably wouldn't even recognize today's Guinness as one of his beers. Oh, and back then, stout just meant a stronger beer with more alcohol. Now, when we think of stout, we picture a certain color and taste. Back then, a stronger porter was called a porter stout. Over time, people just started calling it stout. Arthur Guinness left his strong West India Porter and his Dublin brewery to his son, Arthur Guinness II. By 1810, Arthur II was making a beer called Superior Porter. Thinks he can top his dad? Back then, porter beer was super popular, but people started liking stronger, bolder kinds of porter instead. That's when Guinness made the Superior Porter, which was like a stronger or stouter kind of porter. Some people called it the Single Stout. Later, he made an even stronger one called the Extra Superior Porter, or the Double Stout. The Extra Superior Porter got a new name, Extra Stout. By the 1840s, it was the main beer the brewery was making. This beer became super popular. With its growing fame, the Industrial Revolution and the smart business skills of the Guinness family took off and became a big success. Back in 1850, Arthur Guinness's son, Sir Benjamin Lee Guinness, took over running the brewery. Later, in 1868, his son, Edward Cecil Guinness, took charge. From then on, the two of them worked hard to grow the family business. They turned it into the biggest brewery in Dublin and, eventually, the biggest beer brand in the world. Over time, they used science, tried new ideas, and created fun ads like "Guinness is good for you" and "My goodness, my Guinness" to keep the brand popular and growing. Guinness invented the first nitro beer way back in 1959. Nitro beer is made with a mix of CO2 and tiny nitrogen bubbles. Those little bubbles are what make Guinness so smooth and creamy. They're also the reason a freshly poured pint of Guinness looks like it's flowing backwards. Cool, right? The bubbles go down the glass instead of up. Pretty cool, right? There are a bunch of different kinds of Guinness now, but the one most people know is the classic kind poured from a nitrogen tap. That tap was invented 62 years ago. If you've never tried it, Guinness is a dry Irish stout. It tastes like coffee and chocolate. And even though it's a stout, it's not super strong. It's got lots of flavor, but it's still light enough that you can easily have more than one. That's how Guinness has changed over time. From the old porters in the Industrial Revolution to the extra stout and finally the smooth, creamy Guinness draft we all know today.